All righty. So I will be pausing throughout to offer some commentary, but pay attention to their errors in reasoning and their lack of logical analysis of this situation. Remember, if you have a problem with this, your argument logically can be, I think parents should tell their children their biological sex, um, and that's your opinion. Remember, that's pretty much what it comes down to. And parents have the right to withhold that information, I suppose, if they wanted to. But nevertheless, let's listen. Okay, now when I think of something free, dairy free, it means it doesn't have it, right? Oh, that's dairy free. That's, sugar free. So what they're saying, so he's basically saying is that the parents are raising their baby without a gender? No, they're letting the child pick the child's gender. So they're manipulating this argument. They're creating a completely distorted view of the argument, otherwise known as the straw man fallacy. Remember, notice how his tone of voice here seems a little bit condescending. When you attack people, their character, rather than the argument at hand, it's ad hominem or personal attack. So keep an eye out for personal attack and that idea of dogmatism and this idea of distorting the argument and attacking a version of the argument that's not true so you can create a win, so you feel victorious. Again, that's a straw man fallacy. Here we go. Now, what's interesting is it seems as though all of these people have the authority and the credibility to speak on this, right? So we want to consider their ethos, and it seems to be the case that they all have an ethos. Just the facts. Contribute to a constructive discussion, right? Rogerian argument, Rogerian strategy, empathy. And when people personal attack, appeals to fear, scare tactics, slippery slopes, right? It prevents that discussion from happening. ethos, Rogerian empathy. We need to get to a place of acceptance. Thank you. Thank you. What a logical comment on the situation. So our first two guests, the reporter, she presented the facts, the logos, the information, right? We now have a person who has an ethos in the situation, right, with her son. Both very informative comments and reflections on the situation. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When the two doctors share their feelings, if you would. Are they, Dr. Drew, or are you equivocating and shifting the meaning of the word experiment? Doesn't really seem like an experiment. Is there a controlled group? Is there a placebo group? Is there a plan? Again, it seems to me as though they're just choosing to let the child pick the child's gender identity, regardless of what the biological sex of the child is, because Storm's siblings have chosen their gender identity. If you read the article that I mentioned, the one Storm 5 years later, which is different than their biological identity. So essentially, it seems as though the parents were like, okay, our first two children chose a different gender identity or have a fluid gender identity. So with our third child, let's not tell the child their biological sex so that they can choose their gender identity without any stereotypes or preconceived notions regarding that. Again, if you want to disagree with that, that's a logical counter argument. We all have our own opinions. We're all entitled to them. But an experiment? That's exactly right. We do have a culture that's obsessed with gender dogmatism. So there's no other possibility existing that we might not be obsessed or that we could not, right? Again, when you make those dogmatic expressions, it precludes open discussion. That's not what they're doing. They're raising their child and letting the child choose the child's gender, not raising it without. Again, a straw man, a distortion of the argument, because we'd all say, oh my gosh, they're raising their child without a gender. Talk about an appeal to fear and a scare tactic, but it's also a distorted version of the argument. It's a straw man. Relentless teasing and bullying? Slippery slope, anyone? Scare tactics? Slippery slope, scare tactics. Huh. False authority, anyone? False appeal to authority. I know males. If I know males, he's going to be angry. But he doesn't have to keep it a secret. That, again, they're distorting the argument. The situation is that the child gets to choose the child's gender identity regardless of biological sex. So notice how they're straying from the topic, and their fallacious appeals fuel this illogical reflections, these illogical reflections by both of these doctors. Again, distortion of the argument. The parents never said anything like that. Straw man. That's not what they're saying. What a distortion of the argument. Which might, if it's a he, make him angry by itself. Kind of a personal attack, suggesting that storm is not the proper name for this child, or that a male child might object to the name Storm. Again, now we're attacking their choice of name for the child, which again just seems to me to be illogical. So you can kind of see how the fallacies are working as the video plays out, and there's a link on this page if you want to go back and watch it again. And I also put a link to straw man fallacy, because that's next class's reading in fallacy. So if you haven't looked ahead, you might say, what's a straw man? Well, here you go. It's when you, like a scarecrow is a straw man in a garden. It's a fake argument to pests and animals that there's a person there, so they won't eat your fruits and vegetables. They, because, if the birds or animals are eating in the garden, you go out and you shoo them away. So it's a fake person in the garden. So it's a fake argument, right? It's a distortion of the argument. So when you have a straw man argument, instead of replying and analyzing the argument from a logical standpoint, what the actual premises and conclusions are, what the claim is with the facts and reasons to support it, you distort the argument, and then you knock down and claim a victory, right, over this distorted version of the argument, right? They're raising a child without a gender. Of course, everybody would be like, oh my gosh, they're raising a child without a gender. No, that's not what they're doing. They're allowing the child the opportunity to choose the child's gender identity before they tell the child's biological sex, which might lead to various aspects of, right, stereotyping and bias. So I hope this helps explains the fallacies. Click on the straw man link if you want more, and there's more to come in straw man in our class 18 readings, fallacies in Everything's an Argument with Reading. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. And as always, let me know if you have any questions.